So everybody can hear me, right?
Yes, can hear you loud and clear.
Great, great. Okay, so since time is up, I'm going to start today's session. I believe someone was still on their way, trying to grab a coffee for the morning. So I will spend maybe a few minutes to have a quick recap of yesterday. Okay, so please allow me to share my screen. So yesterday, actually, we introduced two major components from Alibaba Cloud. The first one is ECS. The second one is SRB.
Steve, sorry.
But if I challenge you,
Steve, your screen is a white color now.
oh yeah, I didn't show the slide
Okay, okay.
yet. I didn't.
Okay, okay.
Let me switch here. Okay,
Okay, okay. Got
that'll
it.
be the first one I want to show. Um, okay, and I said yesterday we have two modules visited for Alibaba Cloud. The first one is ECS, the second one is SRB. But if if I want to challenge you guys, any of the key concepts you can remember for ECS, I think I can include them all in this overview picture. So look at this picture. It is quite a useful picture to help you to put most of the key components or the key concepts related to the ECS in just one chart. Okay. From here, remember ECS, it is formed or purchased or served and instance, right? So every ECS, we introduced the instance specifications, which mostly is decided by the CPU numbers, memory numbers, and also some IO ops, also the network bandwidth, those kind of different metrics. So based on the instance type and inside the ECS, yesterday there's something I think I didn't mention specifically, which is remember it is a ECS service. It is a running environment, right? So which means for ECS itself, it has something called the metadata to represent himself. For example, the ECS has the VPC he sits in, had the vSwitch he connects to, and also the ECS has like the how to say this, like the image he burn from, right? Those are the things we can call it and the instance metadata. So you can using a special way to find those metadata in Alibaba Cloud. I think yesterday I forgot to mention that. Let me see. Oh yes, this is this way. It's here. And so this is a metadata. So for every ECS, make sure it is Linux or Windows. You log in first. I mean, log into the ECS first. Then you just call this absolute URL. It is a fixed IP address inside your ECS, and make sure you run this command inside your virtual machine, and you will get a lot of metadata with their values. So it is helpful for the some kind of automation operation if you want to configure some scripts to get some values automatically. That will be a very good way to do that. Um, Sorry. Another thing we see is the user data. The user data is quite like, if you are familiar with Linux operation or the Windows operation, we call them the initiation scripts, or in Windows we call them the batch script, which means when the machine was booting, right? Some of the scripts, some of the commands can be combined in and the configuration set and can be initiated or run by default, which will help you automatically set up some special configuration for your particular environment. So user data here in Alibaba Cloud is where you can put those scripts in. So I have another slide. I didn't mention this yesterday. So user data here, again, you can always find your existing user data through the same command in the ECS with a little bit different URL. But how can you set those scripts? So in each of the ECS console, there's a window box. You can put your scripts there, and those scripts will be remembered by Alibaba Cloud, and they will be executed when your ECS server is actually rebooting. Okay, so that is how we call those initiate scripts, or the batch script, PowerShell script. They can all be used and Linux or Windows user data. So that is another key point I want to emphasize. Then besides the instance, remember yesterday we talked about one thing is the cloud disk, right? So every ECS, they can have some cloud disk attached to it. And there's some limitation. The most important one is the cloud disk, it has to be within the same vSwitch, attached to the same vSwitch with that ECS. Then it can be, bind to that ECS. That is the cloud storage. Cloud disk, because we care about the data security, the data reliability, so we want to do the backup, right? So snapshot is the way we can use to do the data level backup. With the snapshot, we can also create something called the image. But remember, if a snapshot can be exported as the image, it has to be system disk, right? We have two types of disk, system and data. Only the system disk contain the operating system information, and only the system disk snapshot can be converted into ECS image. Then this image can be shared, can be copied, can be moved from everywhere to everywhere, which they can be used to regenerate some new instance. So that is, yesterday we call it a life cycle, right? So from instance to snapshot to image, then to instance, this is more like a life cycle. And talking about instance, this is about data, right? We also have something called a network. This is the data part. This is this is the storage part. This is the network part. Talking about the ECS network, we give you two major concepts, right? Remember, the first one is VPC, and the classic is very old concept. You don't need to remember this. For VPC, we talk about the VPC as virtual private cloud, which give you a layer, almost a layer 2, network isolation. So basically, inside one VPC, if you don't do some extra setup, the internal traffic cannot go outside. Okay, and in the VPC, we mentioned about the concept like the vSwitch, right? So every ECS need to connect to a vSwitch to get a specific internal IP address. But at the same time, you want to have an internal firewall to be able to protect and define some customized policy to control the traffic in and out. So security group, remember, we can define two kind of policies here. One is inbound, another is outbound, right? And once one of the ECS attached to a particularly security group, it will follow the policy defined in that security group. Okay. And also, we didn't mention one more thing is there's in Alibaba Cloud, there's a thing called ENI, Elastic Network Interface, which is a virtual network interface. It can be also just like the cloud disk, and it can be attached one more ENI to the ECS. So which give the ECS more network channels, right? Every ENI is just an interface. It can connect to either the internet or to some other, internal vSwitch. So give your ECS even more capabilities to connect to the outside. Okay, so that's the quick recap of the ECS and its key component, including the storage and the network, right? But yesterday we also mentioned something related to money, right? So ECS can be purchased in the subscription mode and pay-as-you-go mode and the preempt mode. And we also have something called the reserved instance, which is actually a coupon-like discount coupon. So if you buy some reserved instance type, if it match a particular type of the instance, they can, benefit from the huge discount, which defined by this reserve instance. Okay, this is about the charging part. I mean the billing part, right? And you also, if you are operation guy and you really make care about, since the ECS was there, how can I daily operate it, right? The daily operation means I need something to log into the ECS. You can use the password, SSH key pair, right? And you can use some console from the ECS. We can use the cloud assistant to do some automatic O&M. And if you want to grant some other people with some different privilege, you can leverage our resource access manager. This is another component, actually another product, right, to do some specific role and user management. And if you want to do resource clarification for resource management, you can tag it and the product environment or the QA environment. So in the future, you can group them into the different billing concept. That is operation. And on the left side, there's something more related to the automatic deployment and orchestration. Okay, in Alibaba Cloud, we have resource orchestration, but now we also recommend you to use something called the Terraform, right? Terraform. Terraform is a third-party, very commonly used orchestration service to help you to organize some template, even complex template, including not only ECS, but other resource. And you can deploy this kind of complex environment in just one click. Auto scaling is something I will share today at the last session. I will introduce this, how can this auto scaling work with the ECS. Deployment side is give you the ECS deployment to put it into the different rack, which means the different physical location in the same data center. You know, in one data center, you have different racks, just like a bunch of the machines, right? It in the same box. But you can ask Alibaba Cloud to put your ECS based on the physical machine's location and put them in a different rack, which give you more, you know, a little bit higher availability setup, right? And the last one I want to introduce here is called a server migration center. If you are working on some migration project to migrate the IDC server or AWS server or Azure server to Alibaba Cloud, this thing is something you cannot avoid. So server migration center is a free tool, can be help you to migrate your existing machines, either physical machine, either virtual machine, to the Alibaba Cloud. Okay, so I'm using this picture to give you a quick recap what the ECS can do and what can actually work with some other component, right, to fulfill and organize a kind of very rich ecosystem. Okay, that is for ECS. And for the SRB, I'm going to give a quick recap also. Remember, yesterday we talked about something called the SRB, right? Let me draw a picture here. This is SRB. And still, do you remember what is inside the SRB and the instance? We call them the listener, right? The listener. So every listener, they need to listen to a particularly what? Listen to a particular protocol, right? Protocol with a pod, right? So every listener, they may listen to the different protocol and the different pod, right? And on the back end, the listener can use something called the backend service, which is actually, it is our ECS, right? So it is our ECS. But each of the ECS, they may be a little bit different about their capabilities. Like CPU memory, they may be different, but they should provide some shared service, which the listeners can always call and forward to, right? Remember, previously in our slides, we use a different color to represent maybe the different service. Okay. Okay, so this is different. And remember, yesterday we talked about the scheduling mechanism, the weight, right? You can define the weight to make sure the ECS, maybe they have a different workload shared. And also we talk about something called the session thickness, right? Or session persistence. So if the same traffic coming to the same session, they may be forwarded to the same ECS keep continuously. Now, I'm going to go into today's agenda. Today, the first product we are going to introduce is RDS. It is our database. The second one is OSS. I'm going to introduce it in another hour. The third one is auto scaling. Okay, I will use a demo to show you how the system actually works for the different flexible automation resource creation. So this is today's agenda. But when you look into today's agenda, you may have a new question pop into your mind, right? Regarding this architect, you have SRB in the front end, right? And you have ECS in the middle to handle the incoming request. So the very natural question could be, where should I put my data, right? Should I put my data here exactly on the ECS, right? Or should I put data somewhere more centralized, more unified, and more become accessed centralized, right? So here I'm going to show you the fundamental architect we recommended for every user in the cloud. This is not Alibaba cloud practice. It is every cloud vendor's practice. This is called the fundamental architect. Okay, so in the middle, we have the bunch of the ECS to provide the shared service and handled by SRB and the entry point. But on the back end, everything we don't recommend you to store in the ECS, right? You can think about why. What we recommend you is that every ECS we better to visit a central unified storage, which usually it is the database, right? It is a database. And the database in Alibaba Cloud could be RDS, could be PaulaDB, right? But PaulaDB maybe not today's focus, but you should know the name, and later on I will tell you what it is. So either PaulaDB and RDS, we call them the relational database, right? Because they have the tables, they have the different data schema can be defined in the database so that everyone can write to the database and gain a similar access to the same data. That is also why I said we don't recommend you to store data separately in the ECS, because if you have the same data here and here and here, in the future, it may cause some kind of conflict because the same user ID or same order ID may happening here or happening here. And those kind of conflicts will be really hard for the applications to deal with. But if you put everything here in the same database, right, the database will handle those kind of data conflict. And they will also perform a very important function. It's called the transaction maintenance, right? So for the transaction, whatever happened here, they will make sure everything will fail at the same time or success at the same time. If one of the whole task is fail or not success, they will roll back everything. So this kind of transaction functionality is a very good advantage for the relational database. It also should be leveraged by the application level to make sure your business is maintained and being data consistent in the database. Okay, but another question maybe rise here is, I have the structured tables defined in the database, right? It can be defined as a user or something called the if the e-commerce is called order, right? So those kind of data are very organized. You have the age, name, salary to define a user, right? For the order, you can define the order's ID and creation time and payment, all those kind of very structured data. But actually in the real world, we have another kind of data. It's called the pictures, right? The videos. How can we organize those kind of data? It's not very suitable to put into the tables and organize into the strings or numbers, right? So this kind of data requirement is bringing you another different data category. So this one, we call them the structured, right? Sorry for my English. Structured, this is unstructured. Okay, we call them structured data is here, and unstructured data is talking about the picture and the videos and the binary stuff and the document, right? And document. Okay, so that is today's major purpose. So today, besides SRB UCS, we are going to introduce you first the RDS here, our structured data storage, the database, and then I will introduce the OSS, is unstructured data, and finally I will introduce the auto scaling, and why we need auto scaling. I will later on I will show you the reason. Okay, so now let's jump into the slides for the RDS. I'm going to scare you guys with the first picture from Alibaba Cloud database service portfolio. I keep talking about the database and RDS, but when you really look into this picture and the whole portfolio of Alibaba Cloud, you will see here is where the RDS is, right? So RDS in the whole data portfolio, it fall into a category called the OLTP, the online transaction processing scenario. And RDS is here, the PolarDB is here, and the PolarDB X is here. The PolarDB is another even high-end, more powerful and higher performance and a bigger storage relational database. And in Alibaba Cloud, we also have the OLAP and the NoSQL, but I don't have time to introduce them today. So later on, if you guys really have the interest, I can organize some workshop to introduce these parts. Okay, so today let's focus on the RDS part. RDS, honestly speaking, RDS is Alibaba Cloud managed database service. So it is a service because we and the cloud vendor, we majorly provide the management service, and we didn't develop and we didn't, generate those database engines. Those database engines we supported from RDS, they all some open community, open source software or other cloud vendors, right? Like MySQL, like MariaDB, they are all the open source version. They have their open source version. And the SQL Server, it is from the Microsoft. And the PostgreSQL is also a kind of enterprise level open source database engine. And the RDS support all of them. So which means when you pick up the RDS from Alibaba Cloud and the relational database, the first question you may think about is which engine I may want to install, right? It's based on your personal experience and your business needs. If you are familiar with each of them, just pick up the similar one, but that will make your life much easier. Okay. RDS, we call them a managed service, which means even the kernel, and I said the engine was not generated by Alibaba Cloud, but we still want to bring our customer the most benefits from using our cloud database service. So the benefit of managed service, you do have some pros and cons, right? Let's look into the cons first. If you are using the cloud storage, you may have some limitation, which is naturally may happen, is you may not be able to access the physical server directly, right? Which means you are looking at a database like a RDS, like a MySQL, like a PostgreSQL, but you never know on the backend what is kind of operating system is supporting them, right? You don't need to know actually, right? And another limitation is for the database, sometimes we need to do some kind of so-called the optimization, right? We want to twist some of the configuration matrix, but not every configuration you can use in the physical machine can be found in the cloud console, right? So that is another limitation I want to emphasize here. But you can do see a lot of benefits by using the cloud service, especially for database, right? Definitely the first one is the fast supply chain. In the real life, if you want to set up a database for the physical server, you can imagine how many days you may spend on that. Needless to say, the shipment of your equipment would take days or even months, right? And also through our cluster-based distributed software, we make sure the instance from the cloud has a different availability you can choose from. Okay. And the last one is, since the software version database cloud database in the cloud is distributed, and it naturally can provide some kind of failover function. But in the real life, you may need to take care by yourself. Okay. Okay, so I see someone was asking a question here. Let me take a quick look in the chat box. So Joshua is asking, the circle and my circle, is there a cost difference? Yes, I believe. But the most of the cost difference is not coming from the database engine. It's mostly coming from the addition you choose. So later on, I will tell you what's the difference of the addition, like the single node, the HA, and even 3-node instance. That'll be the major price difference. Okay, for Joshua's question. And for ID, how about if user have their own listening, or you need to use a different listening? Regarding the listening, regarding the lessons, I think the only one is my circle is it's a circle server. Okay, so others are just the open source lessons. I don't think the license may cost you too much. But for the circle server, if you have a circle server database, we suggest you to migrate the data to our circle server RDS. And our RDS definitely have the official license. You can consider the pricing is included, the license and the instance cost together. Okay. And Mohadi is asking about the LPS. The LPS is different based on the different instance, different SSD you used, the disk you used. So later on, I can show you the details about LPS. It is not a fixed number. It has to be based on the different configuration and a different cloud disk you support your RDS. Okay. Okay, now let's see. Here, oh, your question is coming from here. Okay. This one and this one, we are talking about the maximum number. Okay, if you have the highest configuration, you may reach, this is our limitation, like 20,000 RPS and 2 terabyte storage. This number is very important because you know what is the RDS upper limit, right? So in the future, if you have a huge table or huge data, which is far beyond 2 terabyte, you may think to put them in a separate different RDS, or you can think about using our PolarDB, right? Remember, our PolarDB has 100 maximum so far terabyte storage, can far beyond this 2 terabyte limitation. Okay. Okay, Joshua, got it. So for RDS here, left and right, it's just a quick comparison between the traditional way and the cloud way, right? So traditional way, you spend a lot of efforts on this kind of steps. So hours or even days may be spent to bring the database on, right? But for our way, maybe just a few clicks, usually less than 10 minutes, you get a running database there. Okay, I will skip this one. Remember at the very beginning of the training yesterday, we talked about the concept like the IaaS, PaaS, and the SaaS. And we keep asking the question like, what kind of category this product belongs to? ECS, no doubt, we introduced that a lot, that ECS should belongs to RAS, right? But if I ask you a question, so RDS, do you think which category it belongs to? Should be RDS, should be IaaS or PaaS or SaaS? Maybe you are, can you type your, yeah. Any other idea? Good, it's very good. It's very good answer because, you know, can be SaaS. To many people, I think IaaS and SaaS are always easy to understand concept because as and I said, ECS, including the operating system, need to be managed by the user, right? It is very easy to understand concept. And SaaS is also very easy because it is just a quite direct forward service. If you can give me some example, maybe someone can give me some SaaS example, like some famous SaaS service. The first thing pop into our mind is definitely the Microsoft 365, right? And now there's another very famous company. They were known by their SaaS service. It's called Salesforce. Salesforce provide a lot of CRM kind of service. There's another recently there's a newly go public company. It's called Snowflake. If you Google it, Snowflake, they also provide SaaS like big data service from the internet. So SaaS service is, again, it is a directly usable function, which previously may be provided through the individual server or the laptop, like your PowerPoint, like your Word, right? But later on, because the internet is coming in and we have a browser, we have a very high speed internet connection. Some vendors turn those kind of individual and PC-based software into the browser and make it a international accessed, global accessible capability. So I call it software and a service because previously maybe it is just a software. Right now, I make it the same function, but it can be used and accessed from browser and from anywhere. So SaaS is easy to understand, but PaaS, I think, the most confused concept. PaaS, when we say PaaS, we call it the platform and the service. But what exactly the platform means here, right? We see platform. Platform is such a vigor concept, vigor term, right? So what does the platform mean? To me, I define the platform is a platform can provide some web-based API. That's my definition. Maybe you have your definition, right? So if we call something a platform, this platform should be provide some web-based API. And this kind of web-based API should be very organized and just like a full set of middleware service. So that is why the middleware is also mentioned here, right? So PaaS service, I would say RDS is a PaaS service. Because, why? Because firstly, for RDS, we don't see this part, right? I mentioned about that, right? Cloud vendors will maintain this part. And our customer only need to know how can I log into my database and begin to organize my tables and begin to insert some data into my tables, right? And that is why we call the RDS platform and the service. But from my own definition of the platform, what RDS provide and the so-called the centralized API or the web-based API is just the SQL statement, right? So RDS usually they support the standard query language. So you can use the select, you can use the insert, join, aggregation, all those kind of SQL statement to access the service itself. Okay, so that is a little bit concept clarification for the RDS. Similar like the other service on the cloud, to release or to relieve the user's burden for operation effort, right? Every user, they just look into one or two RDS instance, but actually on the back end, a lot of things is going on. A lot of things is going on, including the cluster to maintain and to provide the storage and the computing capability to those instances, right? But at the same time, if you have a RDS instance, you may think I need it to be very stable and high available. We need a mechanism on the backend to support the HA feature. And for the data, similar like the cloud disk, you want to back up your database from time to time. So you have the backup system running on the backend. And sometimes you want to migrate data in and out. Migration is something you cannot avoid, right? And for every instance, just like the ECS, they have their own life cycle. It can be created and can be destroyed. So this kind of life cycle management, we also have something sitting in the behind to manage that. Just like Joshua said, for the performance, for the slow SQL query, you want to do the monitoring also, right? So all these kind of things is managed by Alibaba Cloud. That is why we call ourselves a service. We maintain the backend, and our cloud, our customer only focus on the usage of the service itself. Okay, now you are looking at the similar concept and the ECS, SLB. Remember, for RDS, we also call it an instance. An instance is a combination of what? CPU, memory, storage, and the network, right? It's always there. And if I want to give you some direct feeling of the RDS, let's go back here and log into the console. If you go into the console, you see something called the RDS. You can type into the keyword and find the console there. So maybe I still need to use Singapore because I have some database already running there. Before I look into the details of the console, I can create the instance just for you. So it is always the same questions being asked for the different service you are going to purchase, right? So now let's see billing method. We provide subscription, pay and you go, right? The two different choices. And the region. Region is also you need to decide at the first place. After you decide both the payment, the billing method and the region, here is the most important one. And I said you have 3 database engine you can choose from. It based on your own personal experience and your familiarity with the different database engine. And for each of the engine, you have the versions available. We have a list can be select from here, right? So it is always something here. Let's just take the MySQL as the example. Now, if I put my mouse and select this MySQL 8.0 version, there's something called the addition. So addition is exactly like what I shown in the slides, right? The basic HA, enterprise, and the cluster. But for MySQL, if I put my mouse here, you see, it is very clear. There's a simple architect showing what is the basic means, right? Basic means what? Basic means it's very basic. It is only one node here and with some storage. The problem is the basic is a single point of failure possibility, right? It don't have some redundant resource, but definitely the pros is the cost is very low. And another one, the second one is called the HA. HA means Now we give you two nodes, right? The primary and the secondary. And the primary majorly handle the incoming traffic read and write. The secondary usually don't take the traffic from outside, but they keep syncing the data from the primary to itself, right? So when something was happening, they can do the switch over. That is a typical HA solution for the database. And we also have something called the enterprise version for some financial guy, for some financial company or anything they really think the data is very critical. They need a 3-node setup to even bring a higher disaster recovery or disaster tolerance capability to them. So we have the primary, secondary, and even the loggers instance. And those ones usually will be put into the different zones. Remember the different zones to give them the higher availability promise. So basic, HA, and enterprise, right? So here we have PolarDB also being shown here. So PolarDB is quite different architect. You see here, if you are very, very careful looking into the picture, you see a very interesting difference in here. So here you see storage is combined to this node, and this storage is combined to this node, right? We call them the shared nothing architect. But here, the storage is shared by every node in this architect, PolarDB. We call them the shared everything architect. Because of the architect, PolarDB can have a huge storage, can have a faster backup and recovery performance. And when the architect need to scale out, it is faster than other kind of architect. But anyway, PolarDB is not this focus, but you can keep in your mind that in the future, if you want to find something bigger and faster than the traditional RDS, you can select PolarDB. Okay. And if you go to the macro circle, the Microsoft Circle server, there's a cluster kind of addition. That is why in the slide, I just show you the 3 addition, right? These are from the MySQL version, but if you use Circle server, right? You see here, Circle server, you can have a cluster addition also. That is answer the question previously. I forgot asked by, let me check, asked by who? So regarding the pricing, right? And I said the database engine is not a major factor. The different addition is a major factor to impact your money. Okay, money cost. I will skip this. It's a similar concept. Now let's still keep doing on the console. Right now, I introduced the different modules, right? And here, see, we recommend you to use the local SSD, and we give you a kind of recommendation document to choose the different database. So again, I remember someone was asking about the IOPS, right? So if you use the different different storage, definitely the IOPS will be different. Okay. And let's assume that you choose an enterprise version with 3 nodes here, and you will see that they will ask you which zone you need to put your primary node in. Okay, and they also give you 2 choices. You put your primary zone in A, and if you choose the multi-zone deployment, which means your another 2 nodes will be definitely put in the different zone. But still, if you really care about the performance, you may tell them, okay, even the primary zone and even the primary node and the other node, I want to put them in the same zone, right? So we give you the choices. The decision is on you. Okay. Joshua is asking, do RDS have configuration by traffic? Yeah. Let me see what it is. Maybe I can understand your question. You can tell me if I answer your question or not. Okay. So let's keep looking at this. So later on, I already decided to use the MySQL, the enterprise edition, and put all my node in the same zone, right? I care about performance, so I put them in the same zone. Now I need to decide what exactly, specification I want to set up for my RDS instance. Now it looks like very similar like the ECS, right? We are still talking about this, how many CPUs, how many memories. And here is the maximum connection. This is the RPS utilization. Hopefully this is something you can select and choose from, right? And you can use dedicated instance, right? What is dedicated instance? Dedicated instance, from the name, I would say it is similar like the picture shown here. The dedicated instance is we are not going to share my things with other with other tenant, right? If you are using a common instance, the CPU and the storage space is shared between the different instances. But if you choose a dedicated instance, we will reserve the CPU and some reserved storage database, storage base for your particular instance, which make the whole environment more isolated and more independent to be not impacted by impact or interfered by the other instance. Okay, so that is the name of the dedicated instance. That's why you are looking at here, the dedicated instance. And they also have their matrix. You can decide which one is more suitable to your business and daily operation performance need, right? And you see last one is about the capacity. By default, I set it, this is the minimum one, it's 5 GB, but the biggest one, you see this one, the 2 TB, remember? So one instance, they have the highest capacity to the 2 TB. That is all the configuration I want to show on the console. After you decide all these kind of configurations, you can click, right, to do the setup. For the time reason, I may not create a real one. So I will assume that I already create one and I will go back to the console to find it. I have 3 different engine database running in my console, Postgre, SQL Server, and MySQL. If I go inside, I see a lot of different configurations here, but I'm not going to show this now. I'm going to go back to my slide. Okay. Now, by now you already figure out RDS is our relational database service. It has different database engine. It has some different addition, like the single node, HA, and the 3 node, even cluster version. And also regarding the resources sharing levels, we have common instance and dedicated instance. Okay. That is basically, I want to start with RDS. Please keep those concepts in your mind, and let's take a quick break. Now it is already 50 minutes. Let's take a break. Let's come back at 10:30, and I will continue with this concept and console demo. Then we will move to the OSS. Okay, so let's take a 10 minutes break and see you in 10 minutes.